All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar today. Brought to you by Fortra, where we've really amped up that investment in the power servers and ensuring that you have everything you need to secure it, automate it, and monitor it. Our topic for today, though, is multi-factor authentication for IBMI. And evaluating the options that are available to you. This is a topic that I actually enjoy and get pretty excited about. So hopefully we'll be able to share some information with you that will get you to that same place. I'm Sandi Moore. I'm a Senior Solutions Engineer here at Fortra and 2025 IBM Power Champion. I've been working on the platform for a couple decades, and security is my happy place. I really enjoy doing this, and I hope that it comes through in our conversation today. Fortra has really invested in the power systems and the security posture that we're able to help customers achieve through a couple different methods with our cybersecurity software, the PowerTech brand, and our comprehensive security services, where we're able to help customers to not only get their systems to a more secure state, but also to maintain that. And this is really, something we feel is really important for the longevity of the platform. With that, we also publish our annual State of IBMI Security Study, evaluating the results of data we collect, and member of the PCI Security Standards Council. And all of the things that we do here is consistent with the Fortra's expansive portfolio of other cybersecurity brands. So if you haven't looked at those recently, you should check it out. We've got a lot of good stuff. But today we're focused really on IBMI, and probably thinking, you know what, this operating system secure. It has a lot of secure functionality that's available, but what you need to start thinking about is it by default? And I actually like to think of it as secureable. There is some assembly required. You have to take some steps to actually get these systems to a more secure state by taking advantage of the options that are available. Now, I know that security is a concern. Every year we do our IBMI Marketplace survey, and this is information that's provided by you, our customers, and people who are not customers who are on this platform that are providing their insight into what they see as the market and what you're doing with your IT environment, the IBMI in general, but also really focusing in on IBMI specifically. One of the top concerns we've had every year has been cybersecurity. For 2025, 77% of respondents said that cybersecurity was their number one concern. So we've got a secureable operating system, and everybody's really concerned about cybersecurity. Interestingly enough, when we break it down and look at the survey and look at the solutions that people are looking at to implement or have in place already, I'm really surprised that multi-factor authentication is not in the top 3. That could be because I don't talk about it enough. That's what we're going to do today. Really, this is something that is a critical functionality that needs to be considered. I'm sure you have authentication in other parts of your environment. All right, we're going to cover why you're going to look at MFA on IBMI, look at integrated MFA, and then some of the other options available to you. First, of course, is why you're going to do MFA. And I think as a general principle, it's important. It's really taking that compromised password and removing it from the equation of a security breach. And it's taking that combination of something you have, so your user credentials or your user profile name, and something you know, which is your password, and then adding an additional value to confirm who you really say you are. There's a lot of different ways we can do that, and it's always a good practice. We have multi-factor authentication in so many parts of our lives, everything you do, your own personal business, and probably in your work business as well. So we need to make sure that we're addressing that and that we are, in fact, going to have that validation for the servers. There are some regulations that actually explicitly say that you should be using multi-factor authentication. Not all IBMI systems fall into scope for these, but it could be PCI DSS, FTC, the SOC 2, ISO 27001. Cyber insurance policies very often require multi-factor authentication on core servers. HIPAA, that one actually is not explicit, but in fact, it does call out validating administrative credentials. GDPR, it's also not explicit, but does multi-factor authentication will help you to achieve GDPR compliance. So it's not explicitly required, but it can be part of achieving that. NIST suggests it's highly. CISA, state and local government entities may have some requirements. And then think about where else you do business and what countries you do business in. Either it's your customers, your vendors, business partners, whatever. There could be some additional requirements that may be overlooked. So we want to make sure that you're actually leaning into that, because it is something that is widely known to be an excellent source of security in preventing breaches by threat actors. When you look at how it should be used, if we focus on where it is possible to add multi-factor authentication. So any place that there is technology to actually use that functionality, highly recommended to do that. We also want to focus on the most sensitive systems. I talk to a lot of customers who have an IBMI. Wait, that's all of you guys. Yeah, so your core servers, your IBMI system, that's a pretty sensitive system. If I asked you if you were able to unplug the system and continue to do business today, could you? If you can't and your business is going to suffer, it is a sensitive system. You need to consider any servers that have remote access allowed, admin accounts. And that's one that I find interesting, because there's actually a lot of debate on what are admin accounts. And I will tell you, an admin account on IBMI is going to be a profile that has a special authority, has the ability to run commands, has access to the data on the system. And it's not always based on a job title. So on IBMI, you have to be very careful when you're evaluating, because admin accounts are not always who you think they are. Any financial system. So ensuring that the financial data that is stored on these servers is in fact protected by multi-factor authentication. And then systems that have customer or patient data. And that's really one where determining what kind of information you're storing, and are there other layers of protection that need to be in place as well. But encryption or multi-factor authentication is definitely one of those. And when you're implementing, you want to use the strongest level you can. So you're not using the easiest route, but using a multi-factor authentication method that is going to actually help. Another thing you should be doing is thinking about with the education of employees, and we'll talk a little bit more about that too. But first, let's talk about the different levels of multi-factor authentication. So there's a couple different types, and this hierarchy I actually grabbed off of the CISA .gov website, because I thought this one was helpful in kind of breaking down the different types of multi-factor authentication that are available. And from left to right, the least phishing resistant to the most phishing resistant. And the idea here is that phishing is huge. Social engineering has been used heavily for these types of attacks, and they're getting better at it. So as technology evolves for us, it evolves for the bad guys too. So the SMS or voice MFA is going to be your least sensitive. It can be easily compromised. People looking at their device are going to be able to rattle off the code, or someone looking over a shoulder kind of thing. So there's some different problems there. App-based multi-factor authentication, this is probably the most widely used for business purposes inside of your environments. And you're going to have mobile push notifications, maybe with number matching or not, one-time passwords, or a token-based one-time password. So those are going to be kind of at the middle of the road. better than the SMS or voice messaging, but not as good as the FIDO or the public key infrastructure, the PKI based. So really deciding where do you guys sit and what's on the system. There's a lot of things to consider when you're figuring out which type of multi-factor authentication is going to best fit. Uh, when you're implementing, one of the things I want you to think about is keeping it user friendly. As you're evolving and putting security layers in place, we don't want to frustrate people to the point where they take shortcuts that are actually creating more security problems than you're solving. Couple things you can do, keep in mind, is to keep the process simple, not making their lives so difficult they can't follow the instructions. Use technology that is familiar to those users. And some of these multi-factor authentication apps with the 6-digit rolling codes are really familiar to us. We use them for multiple purposes. And then, finding that balance between security and usability, not getting yourself to the point where your users are so frustrated that they're leaving, right? Got to keep employees, have to keep people working, but still secure. Well, make sure that they have alternatives, right? So the different technologies available and letting them choose the one that best fits the way they work. Whether it's a cell phone, maybe someone doesn't have a smartphone or they forgot their phone that day. Maybe they prefer to use a YubiKey, different or desktop app. There's just different things that could work better for some individuals. So being flexible and making sure that they have those options. When you're rolling it out, you need to make sure that the instructions for the users are clear, that they can follow them, that it during whether it's the process of enrolling and getting it set up, and then going forward, when they run into problems, what do they do? Who do they call? So that they have that documentation and they know how to navigate this new layer of security. And then training people. And training can be not just how to use multi-factor authentication, but how to use it within your environment. But also with that, you might consider, a little bit of extra training, phishing, right? So they understand, what do these emails look like? If you get a text message from the CEO that says, I urgently need you to send me this money because we have an overdue invoice. Question those things. Most people will, but unfortunately, it does keep happening and people fall for it. And then provide support for the process. So the multi-factor authentication implementation, that's great. You set it up, you let them roll, and then nobody has any help. So making sure that they know who to turn to when they get stuck and that you're able to get them out of it. All right. So with multi-factor authentication on IBMI, really this is that last layer of authentication, whether first or last line of defense, right? The person is at the door, they're at the server, the workstation is compromised, they walked away from it, somebody's been able to obtain access. This is the thing that's going to ensure that the server itself isn't accessed inappropriately by those administrators. One thing we have noticed is with single sign-on, that can create a new exposure. So now you've gone from having to sign on to your workstation and then sign on to the IBMI, that we sign on to the workstation and then the rest of the day we're able to get to all of our resources. That workstation becomes compromised, and now the individual that has compromised it, they have access to the server as well. So now we've kind of like, okay, well, maybe we need to kind of tighten that back up. And again, that goes back to the balance of availability, usability, and security. When we look at administrators, they're really the ones who are going to cause the most damage on the server. And as I said before, kind of alluded to, is that admin access is not specifically your job. It is going to be any profile that has the ability to access commands, run commands, whether through a green screen, ODBC, database server connections, FTP, remote command server. There's a lot of different ways you can run commands on the IBMI that is not necessarily expected or wanted, but you may not have a control in place over that. So multi-factor authentication on each entry point of the system where a user is able to run commands or access data is going to assure that the user is who they say they are and that the access is valid and you've approved it, not only through the credentials, but because they validated with that additional layer of authentication. IBMI is really one that has been overlooked, I think, and as you can see from the marketplace survey, but there's some exciting things that have happened recently. And one of them is the IBMI integrated multi-factor authentication. This was announced this last spring by IBM, version 7.6 of the operating system. They continue to invest in adding security functionality and features for the operating system. I think this was a great move. This is emphasizing how important security is for these servers. I feel like the technology has grown up around the IBMI, and the IBMI is trying to play catch up a little bit. So what we need to do is beef up the security options based on current technology and what the current threats are and how people really use their systems now, as opposed to 20 years ago. This is a really big move for that. And with that, it does have some extended authentication that is going to be included. So what I want to do is actually run through the features for you guys. I am not trying to make this a full explanation of every single detail of the integrated MFA, but I want to kind of give you the highlights, the things that I thought were most important, and how this can, in fact, help secure the system better. And we'll talk about a couple other things too. So with the IBMI integrated multi-factor authentication, you're going to have a time-based one-time password, and it's going to be based on the RFC 6238 algorithm. So really strong algorithm, industry standard. When you're setting this up, the actual the TOTP keys are actually stored in the user profiles. Your profiles are going to change. There's going to be some new parameters on your user profiles that you're going to have to modify. It is going to be configurable based on each user, and you're also going to have some control over the frequency of how often this user has to authenticate when they connect to the system. And it's going to be compatible with physical tokens as well as authenticator apps. So this goes back to the familiar technologies for the end users. They're going to be able to use their authenticator apps to generate those rolling codes and connect to the system. It is going to work with ACS and Navigator for I. So any technology that's shipped by IBM, you're going to be able to easily have that added. When you are working with utilities that are not provided by IBM, such as a third-party application, you can see on the right-hand side there, you're going to be able to still allow for authentication. The user's going to have to change the way they do their password. So the password is going to be typed in by the user and then a colon and then the 6-digit one-time password code. So a little bit different on that user. So this is going to be where your training is going to be helpful so that they know how they can still connect to the system and authenticate as they're required. This isn't going to require any software or firewall changes on the system. So when you upgrade your operating system to 7.6 and meet the other requirements that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, you'll be able to roll this out. A couple other things that's been added that isn't specific to each individual user, but can be helpful, and I think was a good addition, is adding multi-factor authentication for system service tools or dedicated service tools. It is a separate implementation than the MFA on the users, but you can have that option now. Host connection server. This is going to make things a little bit easier when a user is connecting to multiple connection points on the system through a single sign-on. So I open my web user interface for my ERP software, and behind the scenes, it could be connecting to 3 different servers. So this host connection server is going to only require one TOTP when the user signs on, even though in the background it is actually hitting multiple entry points. So it does help with that usability for the server, but still has that validation of their credentials. And then not an actual multi-factor authentication feature, but they did add a function usage ID for to close the gap on all object abuse. And this is something we see heavily through our State of IBM Security study. We see this all the time. There are a lot of profiles on a lot of the systems we look at that have this all object, and the function usage ID is going to close that gap by specifying that a user cannot run a job under one of those all object users without explicit permission. So it does provide additional security there. It's separate but useful when we're talking about multi-factor authentication. In order to do this, there are definitely some requirements that you're going to have to meet and some considerations with that. And I thought I would kind of gather those up to give you a little bit better knowledge of what you're going to be doing in order to activate and use the integrated multi-factor authentication. Obviously, you're going to have to upgrade to 7.6, so that's a given. There are potential considerations. There is compatibility of your current hardware. Power 9, Power 10, Power 10 will be fine. So making sure that you have the hardware, that could entail some additional costs to upgrade your hardware. And then you really need to make sure that your third-party applications that you're using are compatible with 7.6. The system value queue security will have to be at security level 40 or above. And this is one where, again, you're going to have to ensure that your third-party applications are compatible at security level 40. There are some potential gotchas there. So make sure that you are evaluating before you change to security level 40. And there is going to be an IPL required with that one. And keep that in mind. Obviously, you're upgrading the operating system. You've got time there to be able to IPL. I run into some customers that actually have some challenges with IPLing. I had someone, oh yeah, we haven't IPL'd our system in 7 years. I was like, wow, that's crazy. The other system value that is going to be involved is the Q password level. And Q password level will need to be at 4. So there was some changes there. Q password level 4 came out with OS 7.5, and not seeing a lot of adoption of that yet. There's a lot of things you have to dig into before you do that. Communication services may be an issue if you have systems communicating with each other. Your IBM systems will have to be compatible on the password levels there. Could be problematic. QFile 400, if you have those, I think that NFS mounts might be impacted as well. So you kind of got to make sure that you understand all the things that go into Q password level 4 before you take that leap. And all of your users' passwords are going to have to be compatible. And there is a report you can run to review that and ensure that it will work. And think about your clients that are being used as well. If you're using ACS, you're good. Some of the other clients may not actually support password level 4 either. The last one there that you're going to have to do that is a non-negotiable is, in order for the integrated multi-factor authentication to work properly, is that network time protocol, and make sure that there's a synchronization there on the IBMI. If the time doesn't match on the system and the user who is generating their code, it's not going to work. So that does have to be synchronized. All right, so those are biggies, right? These are the things that are going to be a lot of planning and is going to, I don't know, I've heard it up 3, 4, 5, 6 months before, getting your systems ready for this type of upgrade. Couple of other considerations is that your sign-on screen will change. So that green screen sign-on, that initial sign-on screen is going to be changed. You can see there, I got a little arrow pointed at it, the additional factor. If you have a custom sign-on screen, and I've seen some really cool ones where customers have done a lot of things and they've got little logos and all sorts of cool things on their sign-on screens, and that will have to be updated in order for you to implement this. The single sign-on, and I kind of talked about that a little bit with single sign-on being, the fast pass to get to all of your assets. With the integrated MFA, it's not going to authenticate those users that are enabled for single sign-on. If you're not actually being prompted for a password, you're not going to have a place to put the additional factor. So it's not going to work. So you have to make sure that you understand how your users are connecting to the system, and is your technology going to meet that? Cached passwords, anywhere where there's a stored credential, this is going to potentially be a problem as well. You're going to get some failures because those TOTPs are going to expire, and it's going to be something you're going to have to do some discovery on. Where do you have cached passwords? Are there applications reusing these stored credentials? And then maybe change the frequency of the authentication requirements for the individual profile that's being used, or maybe redesign your prompts. So that might not be a great option. Again, having to change your solutions to make this work. So really got to understand your environment in order to understand where this is going to happen. Password circumvention is another consideration, and you've got apps that are going to bypass that password entry to elevate privileges, so that adopt authority, running a job under their user profile. It does conflict with those multi-factor authentication requirements, so that's where that function ID, that QIBM run under user no auth, comes into play. So that will help pull that back around, but you do need to understand how that's happening on your system. This is not a comprehensive list of all the considerations and things you need to look out for. There is some other older legacy type interfaces and technologies that are also going to be a potential problem. So really, I would dig in and do your homework before you roll this out in your environment. Okay. So you've got some options here. And when we're getting ready for multi-factor authentication rollout to your IBMI, there's some things that you can run through to ensure that you are ready and that this is going to meet your requirements. First, of course, is do you meet all those requirements? I just laid out a whole bunch of things that are going to happen before you can implement the integrated multi-factor authentication. And if you don't currently meet those, what is it going to take to get there? And I know that some customers have challenges with environments with multiple IBMI partitions that have different OS levels. They've got one that's stuck on this, and I'm not going to tell everybody, but an unsupported operating system, and they can't upgrade the operating system because they can't upgrade the application and so forth. So you're kind of stuck. So making sure that you know all of your systems and how things are being done. I know that, I mentioned that the password level 4, that's been available since May of 2022. And when I look back through our security study data, at almost 400 systems that we evaluated since June of 2022. So after 7.5 came out, I found that there were only 48 systems that were actually at 7.5 by that point, and none of those were actually at password level 4, but half of them were at password level 3. So there's been some slow adoption on some of these. It might just be don't have time to go back and find all of the information and beef up the security, which is why I said at the beginning, the operating system, this platform is securable. You have to do the work. Another thing to consider is how many partitions you have, and are you going to be able, what is the lift on managing MFA on all of those partitions for the number of users you're going to be authenticating. And so really kind of figuring out there, what does that look like? How many users do you have? Who needs to be authenticated? Is it just admins? Who are your admins? Are end users going to need to be authenticated? Customers have access to your system. Vendors have access to your system. So really understanding what your end result's going to look like and how many users are going to be included in that count. If you have existing multi-factor authentication in your environment, maybe it's going to be less of a lift to integrate into that for your IBM multi-factor authentication. That's going to really help with that user-friendly side of things and making it more achievable, especially if you're looking at large numbers of users and authenticating them. After going through all of this, you're going to have some better idea for yourself if you are going to be able to do the integrated multi-factor authentication, or if maybe looking at a third-party solution that if that's going to be more achievable for you. When you get there, there's PowerTech multi-factor authentication for IBM, which is one of our tools, is one option that is going to definitely get you there faster as far as working with multiple OS levels and not having the OS requirement, not having the system value requirements to do that. Well, I do encourage using all of those strong security settings and ensuring that the security values or the system values are set correctly and to their strongest. This can help and will still authenticate your users even if those values are not set appropriately. You're going to have audit trails and integration to a SIM solution. Make sure that failed authentications for administrators, that somebody knows about it, because that's important. Administering it's going to be pretty straightforward. Managing multiple systems, multiple users, and having multiple IBM profiles tied to an individual human. So that is going to definitely make life easier for you in the implementation side of things. And of course, it's also going to make it more user-friendly, especially if you're going to be able to tie back into your existing MFA infrastructure. Your users may already be using some of the apps that are out there, and rather than having to change the way they're doing things, be able to just use the same app, use the same credentials that they already have, and just tapping a button. So there's definitely some advantages, and it's not one or the other. You can do both. It's about deciding really where you guys fall in that checklist of requirements and achievability. With PowerTech MFA, what we're going to be able to do is you decide which users are going to be required to authenticate. When they sign on to the IBMI, our agent on the IBMI is going to recognize the user is supposed to authenticate, pass that request off to the authentication manager. And it's either going to go to your Radius server for your existing authentication or through devices set up in our software if you don't have existing MFA, and be able to authenticate on that device, whether it's the YubiKey, the app, the desktop agent. And once they've authenticated with the method that they have set up already, once they've authenticated, they get the green light and they're on the system. So long time to describe a very fast process, but it's really about getting that user validated before they connect to the system. You're going to have green screen, you're going to have the ODBC server, FTP server, file server, sign-on server, and a couple of others. So all those points where you're going to have users that have access to run commands, have data access, back to where should that be implemented and how should it be implemented, making sure that the core server is authenticated when those admins connect. All right, so you've got some ideas here. I've given you some things to think about. You may not even have been aware of this, but we do have a lot of resources for you that can help beyond PowerTech MFA. So as you're starting that security journey, or if you've already gone down that whole road and you want to see how you added up on your efforts, you can look at your potential risk of a security incident with our security scan. Our security scan is the source of the data for our State of IBM Security study every year. And cool thing is it's no cost. So you're going to have the opportunity to run the scan, runs really quickly, 30,000 foot view of your security on the system, so you can see how many admins do we have. Do we have all of those non-green screen interfaces covered? Or are they sitting there waiting for somebody to take advantage of? So it'll give you that visibility to what's happening so you can start prioritizing your next steps. We have a whole suite of security solutions under our PowerTech brand, whether it's vulnerability assessment, intrusion prevention and detection, compliance and audit, encryption, virus protection, identity access management, or that multifactor authentication we've been talking about falls, secure managed file transfer, security policy management, and security and integrity monitoring. So really that full suite of security solutions addressing all of the different layers that are necessary to secure core servers. On the back side of that, our professional security services. These are really where we're going to be able to give you guys the skills that you may not have. Being able to work with a security team that all they do is IBM security, and they'll be able to help with assessing your vulnerabilities on the system with a risk assessment, architecture, remediation, once you've identified what needs to be changed. Maybe you want to have somebody take care of it for you and give you the knowledge with secure care, single sign-on managed services. And then once you've done all the things and got your system nice and tight and secure, pen testing, making sure that in fact you have checked all the boxes and that you don't have any vulnerabilities out there. If you're audited, that is typically a requirement there as well. So we'll be able to help you with that. All right, lots to think about. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can visit us on our website at power.fortra.com. Send an email to info@fortra.com. And I look forward to having a conversation with you. If you do have any questions, go ahead and drop them into the Q&A there, and I will get those answered here after the webinar. Have a great day.